Also, I flame Zeri a lot. I think I should mention this. If there's any Zeri players in chat right now, something I want to mention about Zeri is, I think Zeri is finally in a spot where we don't just have to nerf her all the time, which is a big win. Historically, if Zeri was ever good, as a Zeri main, you would have had to be like, the nerfs are coming, she's gonna get gutted, and that would have happened. Because for a long time, she was just this complete pro monster that we couldn't really figure out what to do with. The rework that Truexi did to Zeri, like a couple years ago, I think was incredibly successful. And so nowadays, when we nerf Zeri, we're not looking to delete her from pro. We're just looking to make sure she's balanced, just like any other champion in League of Legends. So I just want to note that, like, if you're a Zeri main, I want to make it pretty clear that, like, it's a lot different now. She's no longer in a spot where we just have to nerf her on site. So you can actually, like, feel... I think she's, like, basically... I guess what I'm getting at is I think overall she's, like, in a pretty decent spot right now and is, like, just a lot closer to being, like, a normal League of Legends champion who can have, like, normal League of Legends champion balance. And I think that you can thank Truexi for that, the guy who did the rework a couple years ago. So just noting, it's like, Zeri is definitely not in the same spot she was even a year ago, where it's like, is she in pro? Nerf! She's now more in the spot of like, okay, let's make sure she's not OP, but we don't just have to nerf her down to 44 whenever she does anything, which is, you know, exciting. It's cool. I'm glad she's there. I think we've done a lot of good changes to her over the last couple of years. Zeri player here, and I don't think it was a good idea to ruin her identity. I think you're totally legitimate to say that. Unfortunately, her identity could not be sustained in League of Legends. So, well, I think it's totally legit to be like, you had this crazy fast mosquito, why'd you get rid of that? The problem was we had to. The problem was that it just didn't work. That was a character who had a 43%, 42% win rate and was still 100% pick ban in pro. That just wasn't sustainable in League of Legends. And so, while I definitely sympathize that, like, something was lost, something was definitely lost. She was definitely, when she came out, a very unique and special champion. I think she's still unique and special. I think, like, she still has an identity. It's more restricted and not as crazy, but it's still there. And right now, she's actually a playable champ. So, like, check this out. Let's see if we can see League of Graphs here. The thing about Zeri that makes me, like, pretty happy with how she's ended up, which, again, I definitely, if you think that old Zeri was better, you're totally reasonable to say that. I don't think that's a wrong statement. She was a very funny and cool character, old Zeri. She definitely was. But one thing about Zeri that I think is, like, pretty good right now is she's actually, like, one of her historic highs for, like, just playability, which I think is a pretty big win overall. So, yeah. I think the team has done good changes to her. But, yeah, we definitely had to remove something special. But sometimes you have to do that because it was, like, pretty wild. So yeah, basically valid. I wish it could come back, but it was too much. Zeri is my 200 years champ. She's the one. If I would say any of my champions are 200 years, it's definitely that one. But I think she's in a lot better spot nowadays, so fingers crossed. Now, that said, if we ever got into a spot where Zeri was not in pro really at all, if we ever got into a spot where you're like, if we buff this character in a crazy way, she won't just instantly take over pro. If we ever got into that spot, I would love it if her ultimate gave a bit more movement speed stacking as the game progressed. I think that's one thing on her that's, like, pretty small right now, deliberately so, that in the long term could go up. If we were fairly certain that she wouldn't just become a pro god when we did it. But, like, her ultimate movement speed per stack, like, went up from, like, 1 to 2 with rank or something like that. I think that could be a really fun long-term buff for her. But it's not something we can do at any point in the near future, because we would definitely need to be in a spot where, like, if we do this, she won't just be the 100% crazy 40% win rate pro champ that she used to be. But I do think it could be fun if we ever got to that spot. Who knows? Move speed is broken because it's something not linear, the opposite of raw stats. So the reason move speed is broken on Zeri is purely because of her ultimate. Move speed was broken on Zeri because her ultimate said, I can reach a state where you cannot catch me and you cannot escape me. And that is a very, very powerful state to be in. The fact that historically she could get to this point where there was no options for a character who wasn't like Vi, who could just click her and kill her with her ult. Made her an incredibly potent hyper carry that was like basically guaranteed to win any fight that went long, even if she didn't do any damage. And like that's the issue with Zeri, is this combination of you can't catch me and you can't get away from me. I think it probably is a lot more tenable if she couldn't go over walls. I think one of my mistakes when I made Zeri was letting her E go over walls. It's sweet, which is why I did it. It's so cool to like surf over walls. It's so fun. But when I made that change, when I let her E go over walls, I think that probably just guaranteed that the ultimate would be broken in the long term. Whereas a version of Zeri who has the old like mosquito ult but can't go over walls, that character is probably a lot easier to deal with. And so you might be like, August, why don't you just remove that? Why don't you just remove the E going over walls? Well, post-ship, that's hard to do because of her W. Her W is like, her kit right now is actually very, very based around going over walls, especially because that W shoots through walls and whatnot. Like a lot of Zeri's gameplay is around like EWing over a wall and then ulting people. And so it would be a pretty massive shift in her kit if her E couldn't go over walls. And it would probably, I guess, require a rework of the W, which could be pretty negative. I'm always curious about how champs with resets are balanced and when the thought process when new champs with resets are made. It just typically feels like champs with resets are flashing at pennas. So that's true. It's a very reasonable criticism of like, hey, these characters are so flashy. Are you just trying to make big play 200 years champs? But the actual answer is resets are a really good way to gate champion effectiveness in a way that is fair. That's really important. Okay, so let's take SAMIRA as an example, okay? SAMIRA's E, it resets, right? We'll start with this point. SAMIRA needs her E to function. We'll start with that. If SAMIRA doesn't have her E, she's significantly worse of a champion. And so one of the ways we can make sure that she was a functional champ is give her E a 3-second cooldown. And so she just cast it a bunch of times. That makes a version of SAMIRA that's incredibly versatile. And that's actually probably very unfair. If SAMIRA's E just had a 3-second cooldown, that would be very unfair, unless Drutut was playing it, and then it would be fair because he just int all the time, right? So like, does that make sense? Like SAMIRA's E for most players would be unfair, unless they're Drutut, and then it would be fair because he's just gonna int anyways. So glad we got that out of the way. So by making it a reset, so then we go like, oh, well, let's make it a 16-second cooldown, okay? That's more fair. That's more reasonable to play against. She casts it, it goes on cooldown. But here's the problem. Now SAMIRA can't use her E offensively, because if she uses it offensively, it's gonna go on cooldown, and then she's like, I'm out of luck. And so now, if it's a 16-second cooldown, she has to hold on to it to play safe, right? And then, if we give it a reset, it basically says, in a moment where you think you can get the kill, go crazy and pop off. Whereas if you fail to get the kill, or you're unable to get the kill, your spell is very restricted. So basically what I'm getting at is resets create this idea that it encourages aggression in a way that is like generally more fair than just making the character have a low cooldown. That doesn't mean that SAMIRA is fair, to be clear. That doesn't mean that Zed is fair, or Akshan is fair, or Tristana is fair. I'm not saying they're the most fair characters in the game. What I'm saying is those resets on their spells encourage aggressive patterns that are probably good in a fairer way than just saying your spell is just up all the time. With a reset, there's at least this condition of, well, you've got to get a kill. As an example of a character would be way more fair, imagine Zeri's ultimate reset when she killed someone instead of getting, just resetting when she's attacking people, right? Zeri's ultimate resetting when she kills someone is probably significantly more fair because there's a very fair condition on it, which is kill someone. And you're not always guaranteed to kill someone. You're not always able to kill someone. Sometimes you're against Malphite. And you're like, well, I guess I can't kill that guy, right? So it just depends.